Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday afternoon, the U.S. Supreme Court dropped an absolute bombshell ruling, and I'll tell you what, right now, the far-left radical progressives are absolutely melting down. Now, as many of you know, the state of Tennessee recently attempted to ban all sorts of transgender youth care for minors, but the issue ended up going all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court because the far-left radical progressives argued that Tennessee was violating people's constitutional rights. Well, as it would turn out, they were wrong. Take a look.
What would seem like almost a rare victory for common sense in America because the Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's ban on transgender medical treatments for minors. We're talking puberty blockers and hormones. In a 6-3 decision, the High Court ruled that the ban is not discriminatory. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority and said, "The court's role is not to judge the wisdom, fairness, or logic of the bill, but only to ensure that the law does not violate equal protection guarantees." And it does not. Questions regarding the law's policy are thus appropriately left to the people, their elected representatives, and the democratic process. But Justice Sonia Sotomayor for the liberals dissented, saying that the court is abandoning transgender children and their families to political whims.
Political whims? Folks, all that matters here is whether or not the states have the constitutionally granted authority to do this, and guess what? They do. What we're talking about here is just yet another case of a bunch of radically progressive Supreme Court justices, in this case, Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan, and Justice Jackson, deciding that their radically progressive agenda is more important than actually properly interpreting the U.S. Constitution, which they all swore to uphold, by the way. So thank God that they were in the minority on this decision, because I'll tell you what, folks, one of the biggest mistakes that our founding fathers made was not giving us an easier way to remove Supreme Court justices, because if these three had their way with the country, we wouldn't even have a constitution anymore at all. They'd just have us living under a radically progressive totalitarian dictatorship. But you know what, folks? On that note, take a look at this.
Mike, what are the implications of this? It was a 6-3 decision, which to most Americans watching tonight is like, how could this not be 9-0? But there you have it. That's where we are in the court right now.
It should be 9-0, but the three left-wing justices think that there is a federal constitutional right that prevents states from regulating gender mutilation surgeries on kids, pills and surgeries on kids. These are kids who are depressed. Maybe some of them are gay. Maybe some of them have gender dysphoria. Maybe it's social contagion. But these states have decided that they want to outlaw these procedures because these are life-destroying procedures on kids. And there is an industry growing around this where they're making a lot of money making these kids their guinea pigs.
And now, folks, everything he just said is absolutely true, and there's a lot to unpackage here, but before we do, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a lot. But okay, check this out. The reality is, transgender care for minors completely lacks any sort of scientific evidence, with well-documented risks like infertility, bone loss, and serious crippling depression far outweighing any of the unproven benefits. Really, this decision prioritizes the safety of minors, ensuring minors are shielded from unproven medical procedures like puberty blockers and hormone therapy. In fact, over 24 states have similar bans, just like Tennessee, reflecting a national consensus that minors should not undergo life-altering medical interventions that are totally unnecessary. And so this is why, according to a massive nationally sweeping poll from just a few months ago, 71% of Americans nationwide, including a whopping 54% of Democrats as well, want to see things like hormone replacement therapy totally banned for minors. As every single person with a functioning brain understands, minors cannot consent to things like having their body pumped full of foreign hormones. There's a reason why we don't allow minors to get tattoos or get married or buy cigarettes or dozens of other things. It's because the brain of a 12-year-old, for instance, isn't developed enough to properly be able to understand the long-term ramifications and consequences of making some of these massive decisions. In this case, injecting a bunch of foreign hormones into your body. But so folks, like I said earlier, right this very moment, all of the far-left radical progressives are absolutely losing their minds. Take a look.
Well, the ACLU, as you can imagine, Mike, very upset about this. One of the ACLU attorneys saying that people are basically fleeing because of these onerous rules. Watch.
Families in Tennessee, many of them are discussing potentially moving out of the state or moving out of the country, just based on what's been happening in Tennessee as well as, throughout the United States, with a lot of the executive orders that are aimed at trans people.
Okay, leaving the country. I mean, European countries have said no to this because surgery, hormone blockers, all the rest have had an inalterable effect on young people. We brought on these stories of these detransitioners and others who are just not in a position to make a decision. But the doctors and the hospitals that are making millions of dollars off this, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. It's totally demonic and corrupt.
And so you know what, folks? She is absolutely right about that. This entire situation is, in fact, both evil and demonic. But so what this Supreme Court ruling does is uphold Tennessee's ban on gender transition treatments for minors and allow other states across the country to do the very same thing, totally solidifying the state's right to protect children from being irreversibly harmed. But I'll tell you what, here's maybe the best thing about this ruling. It totally supports President Trump's ongoing endeavor to limit transgender interference in sports, in the military, and in our school systems, further protecting not just fairness, but also biological reality. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about all of you, but when we're talking about making America great again, it's stuff exactly like this that I personally have in mind. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.